Most people spend their entire lives chasing a paycheck, and that's why they never break free. From the time we are young, we are taught that the only way to make a living is to trade our time for money. We're told to get good grades, go to college, find a secure job, and then spend the next 40 to 50 years climbing someone else's ladder, helping someone else build their dream. And while this advice sounds safe, while it may feel comfortable to many, it is exactly the trap that keeps the majority of people stuck in the middle class forever. The truth is, the middle class mindset is built on exchanging hours for dollars. And when your income depends only on your time, you will always be limited. Time is the one resource that none of us can multiply. We all get 24 hours in a day, and if your money only comes from those 24 hours, your life will always be capped. Think about it. The middle class works hard, but they live paycheck to paycheck. Even when they make more money, their expenses rise with it. They get a raise, they buy a bigger car, they get a promotion, they move to a bigger house. They are constantly in a cycle of earning and spending, often relying on just one source of income. And when that source is threatened, whether it's because of layoffs, illness, or economic downturn, everything they've built can collapse in a moment. That's why the middle class lives with anxiety, because deep down, they know their security is fragile. Their entire life is built on the exchange of time for money, and one disruption can shake the whole system. Now, let me tell you something powerful. Escaping the middle class forever requires a complete shift in how you see money and how you see your life. You must move from trading time for money to building assets that produce cash flow. This is not a small adjustment. It is a total transformation, because the wealthy, the people who live with freedom, do not rely solely on their time. They rely on assets, things that work for them, whether they are awake or asleep, whether they are on vacation or working hard, whether they are in their 20s or their 70s. Assets are the great multipliers of wealth. And unless you understand the difference, you will stay stuck. An asset is anything that puts money into your pocket without requiring your direct presence every single day. A rental property that pays you every month is an asset. A business that generates profit, whether you are physically there or not, is an asset. A book, a song, a course, or any intellectual property that continues to sell long after you created it is an asset. Stocks, dividends, royalties, systems, brands, networks, these are assets. And here's the beauty. Assets pay you again and again for work you may have done once. Contrast that with a job. When you stop working, your income stops immediately. With assets, when you stop working, the money can keep flowing. That is the secret of financial freedom. That is the path to escape the middle class forever. It is not about how hard you work, but about what you work on. Two people can put in the same number of hours, but one builds wealth while the other stays stuck. The difference is where their effort is invested. If all your effort is invested in a paycheck, then the moment you stop working, the income stops. But if your effort is invested in building an asset, then even after the work is complete, the income continues. This is why some people can retire in their 30s while others struggle in their 60s. It's not luck, it's not chance. It's about building assets instead of depending on wages. Let me make this plain with a simple story. Imagine two friends who both graduate college. The first takes a secure job. He works 40 to 50 hours a week and he does well. He buys a nice car, he rents a nice apartment, and every time he gets a raise, his lifestyle goes up. The second friend also takes a job, but he makes a decision. Instead of only working for his paycheck, he's going to use part of his income to build assets. He starts small, maybe buying a small rental property, maybe starting a small online business, maybe investing in dividend-paying stocks. For the first few years, it looks like the first friend is doing better. He's got the nice house, the vacations, the outward signs of success. But fast forward 10 years. The second friend now has multiple properties paying him monthly. His online business is generating income while he sleeps. His investments are compounding. He has streams of cash flow. Meanwhile, the first friend is still working 50 hours a week, stressed, worried about bills, and fearful of layoffs. One friend has built assets, the other has only traded time for money. The difference is not visible immediately, but over time it becomes massive. One is free, the other is stuck. That's the essence of this principle. The middle class focuses on income. The wealthy focus on assets. The middle class asks, how much do I make per hour? The wealthy ask, what can I build that will pay me forever? The middle class celebrates promotions, while the wealthy celebrate acquisitions. The middle class works harder and harder, while the wealthy build smarter systems. And you must decide which group you belong to, because the moment you shift your focus from trading time for money to building assets, your future changes forever. Now, some people hear this and say, but I don't have the money to invest in assets. And that is the very reason they must start. Assets do not require millions of dollars to begin. What they require is a shift in priorities. Instead of buying liabilities that drain you, new gadgets, fancy cars, expensive clothes, you start channeling that energy into things that can pay you. Start small. Buy a book on investing. Start a side hustle that can grow into a business. Create digital content, a course, or something that can be sold repeatedly. Build a product once and sell it many times. Write down your skills and find ways to turn them into assets. Every great fortune started with something small that grew. The key is to start building instead of only consuming. This mindset is rare because most people are addicted to comfort. They would rather have the new phone than the new investment. They would rather impress strangers with what they wear than impress their future with what they own. And that is the trap. Middle class living is not about income level, it is about mindset. Even if you make six figures, if you spend it all on liabilities, you're still middle class. And even if you start with little, if you focus on building assets, you are on the path to wealth. That is why so many people who win the lottery go broke, while so many self-made entrepreneurs become millionaires starting with nothing. Because wealth is not about the money you earn, it's about the assets you build. So today, make a decision. Decide that you will no longer live your life only trading hours for dollars. Decide that you will start building streams of income that do not require your constant presence. Decide that you will put your energy into assets that will bless not only you, but your children and grandchildren. Because the assets you build today can create generational wealth tomorrow. That is how families go from struggling to secure, from paycheck to financially free. The middle class thinks in terms of survival. The wealthy think in terms of legacy. Which one will you choose? It is time to break free from the cycle. It is time to stop chasing the paycheck and start building the pipeline. Imagine waking up in the morning and realizing that money has flowed into your account overnight. Imagine taking a vacation without worrying that you're losing income. Imagine being able to retire not because your job allowed you, but because your assets sustain you. That is the life of freedom, and it begins with one decision. Stop trading time for money and start building assets. Most people live their lives bound by invisible chains, and those chains are not made of iron or steel. They are made of thoughts, beliefs, and mindsets. The middle class lives in a prison of scarcity. They believe that money is limited, that opportunities are rare, and that risk must always be avoided. They live by the mantra of safety, of security, of protecting what little they have instead of multiplying it into something greater. They say things like, I can't afford that. That's too risky. What if I fail? And because their entire lives are shaped by fear of loss, they never truly step into the abundance that was meant for them. Scarcity becomes their ceiling. Safety becomes their cage. And generation after generation repeats the same cycle because the mindset never changes. But the wealthy think differently. The wealthy operate with an abundance mindset, which is the belief that resources are not scarce, but abundant, that money can be created, that opportunities are everywhere if you learn how to see them. They do not see money as something to hoard or fear losing. They see it as a tool to multiply, a servant that must be put to work. While the middle class fears debt and risk, the wealthy understand that calculated risks and leverage are the keys to growth. The middle class borrows to consume, the wealthy borrow to invest. The middle class spends to look rich, the wealthy invest to become rich. The middle class buys liabilities, the wealthy acquire ownership of assets, businesses, real estate, systems, intellectual property, and that difference in mindset creates a gulf between the two that grows wider and wider over time. If you want to escape the middle class forever, you must first escape the prison of scarcity thinking. You must retrain your mind to believe in abundance, to see money not as something that disappears when spent, but as something that can grow when sown. Every dollar you touch has the potential to multiply if you place it in the right soil. But if you consume every seed, you will never have a harvest. Scarcity consumes the seed. Abundance plants the seed. Scarcity eats the fruit and throws away the core. Abundance saves the seed within the fruit and plants it again and again until orchards grow. This is the mindset that separates those who struggle all their lives from those who create legacies of wealth. The middle class often says, I don't want to take risks. But what they don't realize is that playing it safe is the riskiest thing of all. By avoiding risk, they guarantee that they will remain where they are. By clinging to safety, they sacrifice opportunity. By fearing debt, they guarantee dependence. But the wealthy understand something different. They know that not all risks are created equal. There are reckless risks, yes, but there are also calculated risks. A calculated risk is one that has been studied, analyzed, and taken with wisdom. It is a step of faith backed by knowledge. When the wealthy use leverage, they are not gambling blindly. They are multiplying their reach, using other people's money, other people's time, other people's systems to create more wealth. Consider real estate. The middle class person may look at debt and say, I don't want to owe the bank anything. That's dangerous. But the wealthy say, I can use the bank's money to acquire an asset that pays me every month. One sees debt as slavery, the other sees it as leverage. One runs from it, the other uses it. Imagine buying a property with borrowed money, renting it out, and having the tenants pay down the loan while you collect cash flow. To the middle class, that seems risky. To the wealthy, that is ownership, that is leverage, that is abundance. Over time, the property appreciates, the loan is paid off, and now you own an asset worth far more than your original investment. That is the power of a mindset shift. Now think about business. The middle class person says, I want a secure job, a steady paycheck. I don't want the uncertainty of starting a business. But that security is often an illusion because one layoff, one economic downturn, one health crisis can erase decades of work. The wealthy, on the other hand, embrace ownership. They own the business instead of working in it forever. They understand that building a system, hiring others, and creating value at scale is the way to freedom. Owning a business is risky to the middle class, but to the wealthy, not owning one is the greater risk. Because when you own nothing, you control nothing, and when you control nothing, your future is at the mercy of someone else. The same principle applies to ideas. The middle class consumes, the wealthy create. The middle class watches television, scrolls social media, and buys products. The wealthy write the books, produce the shows, design the platforms, and sell the products. The middle class lives as customers. The wealthy live as creators and owners. That is why ownership is so powerful. Ownership means you have control, leverage, and the ability to multiply. Consumption means you are always dependent on others. Ownership is how you escape the cycle. But let's be honest, this shift is not easy. It requires courage to think abundantly in a world that constantly screams scarcity. We are trained from childhood to fear running out. We are told, don't take risks, don't fail, don't dream too big. Parents, teachers, even well-meaning friends project their fears onto us. And because we hear it so often, we start to believe it. That's why most people live below their potential. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack opportunity, but because they lack belief. Their scarcity mindset has robbed them of vision, and without vision, they cannot step into ownership. But here is the truth. Abundance is not something you wait for. It is something you decide. It is not something you stumble into by luck. It is something you cultivate by choice. Abundance begins in the mind long before it shows up in the bank account. You must decide that there is more than enough opportunity, more than enough resources, more than enough wealth in the world for you to claim your share. You must decide that failure is not fatal, that risk is not the end, and that every setback is simply a setup for a comeback. The wealthy do not fear failure because they understand that every failure brings experience, and experience brings wisdom, and wisdom produces wealth. Failure is tuition. Scarcity fears tuition. Abundance embraces it. Think of the great entrepreneurs, the innovators, the investors who changed the world. None of them played it safe. None of them clung to scarcity. They took risks, they invested, they failed, they learned, they tried again, and eventually they succeeded at levels the middle class cannot even imagine. What separates them is not intelligence, it is mindset. They were willing to believe that the pie is not limited, that creating more does not take away from others, that there is always enough for those who are willing to step out and own. That is the abundance and ownership mindset. And you must begin to practice it in your own life. Stop saying, I can't afford that. Start asking, how can I afford that? Stop saying, it's too risky. Start asking, what information do I need to make this risk calculated and wise? Stop thinking like a consumer. Start thinking like an owner. Stop being satisfied with safety. Start being hungry for freedom. Stop fearing debt and start learning how to leverage it. Stop holding on to every dollar as if losing it means losing everything. Start sowing it wisely so it multiplies. When you change your questions, you change your future. Scarcity asks small questions. Abundance asks big ones. Scarcity says, what if I fail? Abundance says, what if I succeed? When you adopt this new mindset, your eyes will open to opportunities that were always around you, but invisible before. Because opportunities are everywhere, even in times of crisis, even in times of recession, even in times of difficulty. There are opportunities for those who believe in abundance. Some of the greatest fortunes were built in the worst economies, because while the middle class panicked, the wealthy invested. While the middle class ran, the wealthy owned. Fear blinds, but faith in abundance reveals. Picture your life a few years from now. Imagine you choose to embrace abundance today. You take calculated risks, you learn, you invest, you create, and you own. Over time, your assets grow. Your income no longer depends on one job, one paycheck, one fragile source. You have streams of cash flow, you have control, you have ownership. Your mindset has shifted from survival to significance. And as your wealth grows, you are not only able to provide for yourself, but to bless others, to create opportunities, to give generously. That is abundance, that is ownership, that is freedom. The question is, will you choose it? Will you break free from the fear that has held generations before you? Will you step out of the middle class mindset of scarcity and step into the abundant mindset of ownership? This is your moment. This is your call. To live in fear is to die before your time. To live in scarcity is to bury your talent in the ground. But to live in abundance, to embrace ownership, is to multiply, to expand, to live in the fullness of what is possible. So take the leap. Invest in yourself. Build something that lasts. Stop fearing what you could lose and start imagining what you could gain. Choose abundance over scarcity. Choose ownership over consumption. Choose risk over regret. And when you do, you will never be the same again. Most people do not fail in life because they lack talent or potential. They fail because they lack knowledge and they lack the right people around them. The truth is, the middle class remains stuck, not because they are lazy, but because they are uninformed. They work hard, sometimes harder than anyone else, but their hard work is misdirected. They spend their energy chasing paychecks instead of building wealth. They spend their years repeating the same cycle because no one ever taught them the rules of money. And so they stay trapped, not by their job, not by their boss, not even by the economy, but by their own lack of financial education and their choice of company. When you don't know how money really works, when you don't understand how wealth is built, when you surround yourself with people who think small, you will remain small. no matter how hard you grind. Financial education is the foundation of freedom. It is the one skill set that can completely transform your destiny. You can be gifted, you can be talented, you can be skilled in your craft, but if you don't understand how money works, you will always be at the mercy of someone who does. And that is the harsh reality most people live in. They work for people who understand money better than they do. They exchange their time and talent for wages, while those who understand leverage, ownership, and financial literacy use that time and talent to build empires. This is why two people can start in the same place with the same income, but end up in completely different worlds. One learns how to make money, how to multiply money, how to protect and grow money. The other keeps working for it until the end of his life. The schools we grew up in did not teach us financial literacy. They taught us math, science, history, but they did not teach us how to balance a budget, how to invest, how to build a business, how to use leverage, or how to think like an owner. They prepared us to be good workers, not free people. They trained us to memorize and obey, not to create and innovate. And so generations pass, trapped in the same cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, not because they are incapable, but because they were never taught the truth. Financial ignorance has been inherited like a disease, passed down unconsciously, shaping choices, shaping fears, shaping futures. But here's the good news. Ignorance is not permanent. You can choose to educate yourself. You can choose to invest in knowledge. You can choose to break the cycle. The difference between the wealthy and the middle class is that the wealthy see education not as something you finish in school, but as something you pursue for life. They never stop learning. They buy books, they take courses, they attend seminars, they hire mentors, they seek out coaches. They know that one idea, one strategy, one connection can change everything. The middle class says education is too expensive. The wealthy say ignorance is what really costs. Because ignorance can cost you decades, it can cost you opportunities, it can cost you millions. But education pays you forever. Think about it. A single book can change the way you see money. A single mentor can unlock years of experience for you. A single conversation in the right network can open doors you never imagined. But most people surround themselves with the average. They spend their free time with people who complain, who gossip, who talk about sports and television, but never about investments or business or ownership. They are in rooms that do not challenge them, conversations that do not stretch them, and as a result, their thinking remains small. If you are always the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. You should be in rooms where you feel uncomfortable, where you feel challenged, where you feel stretched. Because that discomfort is growth. That pressure is what forces you to think bigger, to reach higher, to act boldly. Wealth is not just about money, it is about mindset. And your mindset is shaped by the people you surround yourself with. If you hang around 5 broke people, you will be the 6th. If you hang around 5 wealthy, ambitious, forward-thinking people, you will become like them too. It is impossible to rise higher than the company you keep. The middle class stays average because they surround themselves with average. They listen to average advice. They copy average behavior. They fear what average people fear. They consume what average people consume. And so they remain average, but the wealthy intentionally design their networks. They pay to be in rooms with high achievers. They invest in masterminds. They build relationships with mentors and coaches. They know that proximity is power. You cannot rise alone. You need people who think higher to pull you higher. Consider the story of someone who worked a job living paycheck to paycheck until one day he stumbled into a seminar. At that seminar, he heard ideas about money he had never heard in school. He learned about assets, about investments, about compounding. He met people who were living the life he dreamed of, and something shifted. He realized that if he changed his circle, he could change his destiny. That one seminar became the seed of transformation. Over the next few years, he kept attending events, kept learning, kept networking, and soon he was not the same person. His financial decisions changed, his investments grew, his business started, and his entire life elevated. That is the power of education and networks. A single moment of exposure can change a lifetime of direction. Now ask yourself, who are you listening to? Who are you learning from? Who are you surrounding yourself with? If your closest circle is not challenging you, inspiring you, and pushing you to grow, then you are limiting yourself. Because the truth is, you cannot think bigger if you are always around small thinkers. You cannot dream bigger if you are always surrounded by fear. You cannot build wealth if your environment is built on scarcity. You must break free. You must seek out those who know more, who have done more, who think differently. You must be willing to invest your time, your money, your energy into being in the right rooms. But most people don't. They say, why should I pay for a course? Why should I buy a seminar ticket? Why should I hire a coach? And that is why they remain stuck. They don't see that the investment in education is the highest return investment you will ever make. The wealthy understand that. They know that a mentor can save them years of mistakes. They know that a course can compress decades of wisdom into days. They know that a single network can produce opportunities worth millions. So they invest without hesitation. That is why they rise. Because while the middle class sees education as an expense, the wealthy see it as capital. And here's another truth. Financial education is not just about learning how to make money. It is about learning how to keep it, multiply it, and pass it on. The middle class can sometimes make money, but because they lack education, they lose it. They don't understand taxes, so they pay too much. They don't understand debt, so they misuse it. They don't understand investments, so they either avoid them or gamble blindly. They don't understand systems, so they remain stuck doing everything themselves. But the wealthy study these things. They learn the laws, the loopholes, the strategies. They master the language of money. And once you know the language, you can play the game at a higher level. This is why some people can come from nothing and still rise to wealth. They may not have inherited money, but they learned to inherit wisdom. They sought mentors, read books, asked questions, took courses, and built networks. They invested in knowledge when they had nothing else. And that knowledge eventually produced everything else. That is the key. You may not have money right now, but you can start with a book. You may not have connections right now, but you can start with a community online. You may not have a mentor right now, but you can start by listening to the right voices, consuming the right content, changing what you feed your mind every day. Over time, as your thinking grows, your results will follow. Imagine where you could be 5 years from now if you decided today to become a lifelong student of wealth. Imagine how your decisions would change if you surrounded yourself with high-level thinkers instead of small-minded complainers. Imagine what doors would open if you chose to invest in mentorship and networks instead of wasting money on distractions. You could be unrecognizable. Your finances could be transformed. Your influence could multiply. Your impact could grow beyond anything you have seen before. And it would not be by chance, but by design, because you chose to invest in yourself. The middle class waits for someone else to teach them, to promote them, to rescue them. The wealthy take responsibility for their own education. They don't wait, they seek. They don't complain, they invest. They don't settle, they stretch. And you must do the same. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for the system to teach you. Start teaching yourself. Start surrounding yourself with winners. Start seeking mentors who intimidate you because they are where you want to be. Push yourself into uncomfortable rooms because those rooms are where your future is waiting. There's a saying that goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it is true. Wealth is not built in isolation. It is built in collaboration. You need networks, you need partners, you need mentors, you need communities of growth because no one achieves greatness alone. Every great success story is connected to a web of people, a web of influences, a web of knowledge shared and multiplied. That is why the middle class, isolated and average, remain stuck, while the wealthy, connected, and informed keep rising. So make the decision today that you will no longer settle for ignorance. Make the decision that you will invest in financial literacy, that you will learn how money works, how to multiply it, how to protect it. Make the decision that you will no longer surround yourself with mediocrity, that you will seek out networks that challenge you, mentors that stretch you, education that elevates you. Because when you do, your life will never be the same. Financial ignorance is slavery. Financial education is freedom. Average networks keep you average. High-level networks make you great. The choice is yours.